Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Alchemia and is from the company Kinsoul Studio. Now if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. You will find a link to that page in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. You don't have to take my word for anything that you see here. You can go to the page, find out more information, and hopefully you'll consider backing the project. Now Alchemia is a competitive game where players take control of alchemists in this magical kingdom, and they are competing to be the Grand Alchemist. But in order to get that notable and noble title, you're going to have to, well, use tiles actually, since I misspoke. But really what you're trying to do is make the crest of creation. But to do that is more difficult than just willing it to be so. You have to make things first because you're an alchemist. So you have to prove that you are up to snuff, that you're actually capable of making something as powerful as the crest of creation. So you have to make just normal, somewhat mundane items. We wouldn't call them mundane, but in this world mundane, and build yourself up before you can finally get to your special artifact. And then once you do that, then you complete the crest and win the game. But of course, as I said, it's easier said than done. So let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype version of the game. So what you see here may change in the final version, just keep that in mind. But then we're going to come back, we'll talk about it some more. Alchemia is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players. The goal of the game is to be the first player to craft the crest of creation. To do this, each player will need to unseal their artifact as well. You have quite a bit of setup to do in the beginning. There are 5 decks of reagent cards, which you will separate by element, shuffle, and put off to the side. Opposite of those, there are the item cards, separated and shuffled by their 4 types, with their recipe sides showing. Players will take turns building the foraging field with field tiles, starting with the city tile in the center. You must make sure at least one movement arrow is touching the movement arrow of a tile that's already down. The only tile you don't place is the phasing glade, which we'll get back to in a moment. You'll make a stock of seed blocks, item tokens, sprouts of endless possibility cards, and a die with only 1, 2, and 3 on it. The special crest tokens, which are both circular and square and represent reagents and items, are placed inside the felt bag. Each player chooses an alchemist to play as. You'll get 2 seed blocks, an aspiration card unique to your alchemist, an artifact that is given to you randomly face down in which you are not allowed to look at, and a hand of 5 reagent cards, 1 from each deck. Each alchemist also has their own special ability on their sheet. Finally, every player places their appropriately colored movement piece on the city. Alchemia is played out in rounds referred to as weeks. Each week has 3 phases. The first phase is the field phase. Every player will get to take all of their field actions using the field action tracker. You start with 5 actions and then roll the d3 to get a foraging bonus of 1 to 3 more. When and if you've taken all of your actions, your turn in this phase is over and the tracker gets passed to the next player. The first type of action you can do is movement. You can move your piece in the field in the direction of one of the arrows on your current tile, by spending an amount of actions equal to the number on the arrow that you used. Next, you can gather reagent cards. If you're on an elemental tile, or fertile patch as it's called, each of which has symbols corresponding to the symbols on the reagent card decks, you can spend up to 3 actions on each tile to draw that many cards from the appropriate deck. Reagents will be used when performing alchemy, although some cards have special abilities on them which the players can choose to use and then possibly discard depending on the card. Another thing you can do during this phase is make use of curious sights, which are any tile that is not an elemental tile. You can activate each tile once per turn by spending a seed. They have a variety of different effects. For instance, the Temple of Greater Elemental Spirits lets you reshuffle one of the reagent decks. The main city tiles let you try and barter with the other players for reagent cards and seeds. The phasing glade that I mentioned before can be summoned by spending a seed on one of the edge tiles that has an arrow pointing outwards, and players can then use that tile to turn 2 reagent cards into 1 ingredient of their choice. The Tree of Endless Possibilities lets you take the aforementioned Sprout card, which is a one-time use card that can be used as any reagent when forming the crest. The Thieves' Den lets you have a random chance at stealing a reagent from another player, and trading posts allow you to acquire item cards from the appropriately typed deck. The last one I'll tell you about is the Beast Swamp. The Seed-born Beast moves from here starting with the second week. Each player during their turn will roll the die before taking actions to determine how it will move from tile to tile. If the beast moves onto a tile with a player's piece, that player must either lose a reagent card or a seed, and that tile cannot be used until the beast moves again. A player is immune to losing anything if he or she is on a tile of her own element. You can also use the beast swamp tile itself to swap places with the beast wherever it is. The next phase is the Alchemy phase. Players can discard reagent cards from their hand for either their type or their element, but not both. What you're trying to do is complete the necessary ingredients on the recipe side of either your aspiration item or one of the other items that you've acquired. If you complete it, you can flip it over and use its ability right away. Players all do this phase simultaneously, and the phase lasts until all players cannot or do not want to synthesize any more items. Every successful alchemy attempt lets you take a tile from the crest ingredient bag. These square and circular tiles fit onto your player board, and you must place them down in order on one side and then the other. If you've laid down the first three, but have not yet unsealed your artifact, you cannot draw from the bag until that happens. To unseal the artifact, you must meet the base crest requirements, which are the first three tiles that you put down. During the crest phase, which is the last phase of the round, you may work on first unsealing your artifact and then completing the crest and winning the game. Each tile depicts a certain reagent type or item type. Discard these during these phases to flip the tiles over, showing progress. When you complete the first three tiles, your artifact is complete and can be flipped over and used. If you complete the next three, you win the game. The most interesting thing about Alchemia is that the creators of the game managed to take a theme and a concept that is very hot right now and has been for a couple of years, the idea of alchemy, and it lends itself very well to board gaming, but they managed to take this theme and make something very new and very fresh with it, and rather than just go for something that is very light, very random, or something that sort of gets choked on its own mechanisms, it doesn't really... it doesn't feel like alchemy because you're doing so many different things. Instead of doing that and falling into those pitfalls, instead, they made a game that has clear Eurogame elements of resource management, but it still really feels like you're building something, that you're making and synthesizing these different recipes, and that you actually have to work in order to do it. So it's not just as simple as, I roll some dice, I get some cards. You have to move your character out in the world and find these different reagents, and then you'll be able to use them to synthesize items, and then use those items that you made. So it's this like compounding thing, because you'll start to get more and more bonuses, and it'll be easier for you. But that's where the other interesting part of the game comes in, because it's a race. Because you and the other players aren't just like, well, in a tie, it does come down to certain things being worth points, but really what it is who's going to get to build the crest first. And if you're not being as efficient as possible with your actions, then you're really going to trip yourself up. And in fact, because there is a small random chance in the game that you will have more or less actions from turn to turn because of the foraging bonus, it just really trains you to be even more efficient than you possibly can be, or that you thought you could be, just to make up for it when you do have a bad turn where you roll the die. So where can you make up that time at? And a lot of it has to do with the special tiles as well. So using the ability of one of the special tiles, which is also thematic, might give you a leg up, or you might not even want to do it that badly, but because your actions are very limited for the turn, you go for plan B and see how it works out for you. Maybe you set yourself up for something better next time. Maybe you use the beast from the swamp the seed-born beast, in order to trip up your opponent, if at all possible. That might be worth sacrificing something else you might want to do if it's not going to be as great a turn for you in any case. So there's a lot of different things going on in the game, and yet despite the fact that it is maybe perhaps a moderate weight game, it is very intuitive. So it's very easy to learn the game, and once you yourself know it, it's not too difficult at all to teach it to other people either, which is I'm sure I don't need to tell you, very incredibly important for a game. And again, because the theme is wedded so well to the mechanism, it just makes that entire process easier as you're racing to build the crest of creation. So you have interesting components, theme, artwork, and just a lot of very different mechanisms that are still paying homage to a lot of traditional Eurogame resource and hand management aspects that a lot of players will feel at home. So if any of those things sound like they appeal to you and or your gaming group, you should go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out more. You can find out what the different pledge levels are, different things that might be coming up, stretch goals, things like that. You can follow the link up in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Thank you so much. That was Alchemia from Kinsoul Studios. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.